We are going to be starting with the book of Ruth, one of the shortest books, certainly in the Hebrew Bible, one of the shortest books of the Bible, but yet it tells a compelling story. So we're going to spend a little bit of time with the book of Ruth. So, as we often do when we begin a new book of the Bible as our study topic, let's start with kind of a brain dump. What do we already know about the book of Ruth?
Well, I read it a couple of times before. It's a it's a woman, Naomi and her husband and two sons go to Moab because of famine in the land of Israel. So while they were there, the two boys got married to Moabite women, and Naomi's husband dies, and the two boys die as well. She's left with two daughters-in-law. So she decided she wanted to go back to Israel because just to spend the last days there. So she asked the daughters-in-law to stay behind in Moab. So the older one agreed. This younger one, Naomi, disagreed. She said, "I'll go where you go, wherever are you people my people? You God are my people, my God." So they both came back to Israel in Bethlehem. So, and one day they had no means to live on. One day Naomi tells Ruth to go out in the field to fetch some grain left over. She goes over there and they meet this guy, trying to remember his name. Oh,
Boaz.
Oh, we're gonna read the book.
Boaz.
Don't worry about that.
Okay, Boaz was very kind to her, and she said, "Take all the grain you want." So she came back and told Naomi that. Naomi said, "Well, go back to him tonight when you're nice dating clothes and lie down at his feet." And then she begged him to provide her with the family. Initially, Boaz agreed. Then he's found out there's another relative of Naomi who had right to um, Ruth ahead of him. So he asked him to marry her and take her land over. He found out he had to marry Ruth. He decided I don't want to do it. So Boaz married Ruth, and then they had kids, and she became grandmother of King David or something like that. Anyway, that's my best summary I could give you.
Quite a summary, Nick.
That is pretty complete. Yes.
That was awesome.
Other things we know about Ruth. We have the outline of the story here. Um, Anything else come to mind with this book?
I love the story of Ruth. I'm surprised every time I notice how short it is because the story, I don't know, it's one I remember. The story of female relationships and loss and, taking the next step. I have this saying, wherever you go, I will go. At my front door. When you leave my front door, you can see that saying in a picture. And I got that from a pastor friend and his wife. So
Yeah, that notion that it is a book focused on the lives of women and relationships between women does give it a very distinct perspective compared to much of the rest of the Bible. Anything else?
Didn't Oprah's mother, the Oprah of today, didn't she misname her, or somehow the birth certificate got mixed up? So
Yes, the name of the person in the Bible is Orpah, and somewhere along the way, I don't know if it was Oprah's mother or the person writing the birth certificate or what, but someone transposed that one letter, and it doesn't seem to have held her back too much. I'll tell you that. So, the name Ruth, and of course the book is named for the book's main character, is traditionally understood to mean friend or companion, but more recent and maybe more compelling linguistic evidence says that it is probably related to a verb that means to satisfy or to refresh. And all of those meanings, friend or companion, as well as, to satisfy or to refresh, they're all pretty accurate for who this woman is and what this woman does. In the Hebrew Bible, Ruth is grouped with books like Psalms and Job, and it is considered one of the so in the Hebrew Bible, it is often broken up between the Torah, the Nevi'im, and the Ketuvim. So the Torah, the prophets, and the writings. So this would be with those books like Psalms and Job. It's also one of the 5 megalot, which are the 5 scrolls, and they are shorter books that are usually read during various Jewish festivals, and because it takes place during the time of the harvest, Ruth is often read during Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks, that coincides with the wheat harvest. So liturgically, it is used usually around the time of Pentecost. The way Christians lay out their Bible, Ruth is part of the historical books, those books that tell the story of the people between entering the Promised Land and the fall of the kingdom of Judah. And this is because the events take place in the days when the judges ruled. So it follows Judges because it takes place at the time of the judges, but it comes before 1 Samuel because the very end of the book, as Nick pointed out, shows us that this is part of David's genealogy. And in a sense, Ruth is a contrast to Judges. Towards the end of Judges, we had this question of, will the one tribe continue because they have been, if the Benjaminites are kind of blacklisted, no one will give their daughters in marriage to the Benjaminites. And then there is another outbreak of violence. Whereas Ruth also has questions of continuing families, but care and concern for others are the ways that is accomplished. Judges ends with chaos. Ruth has all the obligations to family being honored. So while it comes after Judges because chronologically and in the kind of in the greater story of salvation, transitioning from the time of the Judges to the monarchy, it makes sense to have it here. It's also a pretty clear contrast with Judges. The biblical scholar Michael Coogan says we need to be sure to note the ability of these women to function within a patriarchal system and to manipulate that system to their shared advantage. So while working in a set of circumstances that is not favorable to them, these women do find a way to use those circumstances, overcome those circumstances to make it work to their advantage. So the interesting thing about Ruth is, according to people who know a lot more about Hebrew than me, the language and style of Ruth is kind of old-timey sounding compared to a lot of what surrounds it. Some of the verb forms are ones that fell out of use a long time ago. Some of the turns of phrase would sound kind of old-timey to people writing other books of the Bible that we have. So compared to things that we can kind of reliably date, we're pretty sure certain books came from after the time of the Babylonian exile. Ruth sounds kind of old. So there is the possibility that it really is a very old text. It was written down a long time ago, and that's why it sounds old, because it is. Or maybe it was written around the same time as many other books of the Bible, but the authors purposely wanted it to sound like it was from a long time ago. You can see an example of this in chapter 1 of Luke's Gospel. Luke writes his first chapter using language that sounds a lot more like the Greek translation of the Old Testament than other books of the New Testament. So just a lot of the phrasing he uses is very similar to kind of Semitic phrasing in that first chapter, whereas when he gets further into the book, it's more like what other Greek authors were writing at that time. So he purposely wanted it to sound like the Old Testament because he kind of considered it a continuation of the Old Testament. So maybe the author of Ruth is doing that. So we're not sure about whether it really is quite ancient or whether it wants to sound that way. Now, if we want to make a good guess about when Ruth was written, we need to discover why Ruth was written, which also would offer us clues about who wrote the book. Let me pause there. Questions, insights?
I was just thinking about when it was written. You can tell that when Ruth existed by just following the genealogy, right? Like you can figure out date backwards from when Jesus was born, but you're talking about how long after Ruth existed that somebody actually wrote it down. Do we know
Right.
who wrote it down?
We do not. That was actually the very next thing we're going to turn to.
Okay.
Because if we feel strongly convinced one way or another about who wrote it, that probably gives us a much better guess as to when it was written. Any other questions before we blitz on ahead? So the traditional understanding, and very often what we have come across when we are studying books out of the Hebrew Bible, is there is the tradition, so that the 5 books of Moses were written by Moses, and then there are, some more recent conjecture as to who wrote it. The traditional understanding is that Ruth was written by the prophet and priest Samuel, who is also believed to have written at least First Samuel. So that would have mean it was written around the time of King David. So we're probably only talking, a generation or two after the events in the story, if Samuel was indeed the author. We have no way of knowing that. We have no way of proving that. There is certainly nothing in there that says the story of Ruth written by Samuel the prophet. There are, as best I can tell, there are 2 main schools of thought on why this book was written, which kind of tells us when this book was written. The first school of thought says it was written probably by somebody who was a member of David's court for the purpose of supporting his claim to the throne, and that his family had a legitimate claim to the throne, which would have put it around the time of David's reign, sometime around 1000 BC to 960 something BC. So that would track with the thought that it sounds kind of old timey, because it is old timey. It's from a long time ago. Why would people think this? Well, the book begins and ends in Bethlehem, the city of David. And as Nick pointed out, Ruth is from Moab. Do we remember anything about Moab off the top of our head?
Wasn't that mentioned in Judges with the overweight king who got stabbed with a knife?
King Eglon of Moab, I believe. Yep. So yeah, just right there, we don't have to go far to see that, yeah, these are people who are constantly at odds with Israel. The Moabites and the Israelites, not people who tended to get along. So if there is this story out there that one of David's ancestors is in fact from Moab, that would probably get people saying, gosh, can we really have him and his family as kings? Because they're part Moabite. How is that going to work? Deuteronomy 23 specifically says Moabites cannot be part of God's assembly. So this is going to be a problem. However, the way the book tells the story, the book says that the child born to Ruth and Boaz is Naomi's son. So it is actually a descendant of Naomi, who is from Bethlehem. She's an Israelite, because that is the custom of how bloodlines are continued after the death of a family member. And so instead of denying that David has a Moabite ancestor, what this book might be doing is actually saying God was at work in this all along. God brought this person into the story for a reason. So rather than letting it be a story that would allow people to detract from David's legitimacy, they've kind of co-opted the story and said, well, God was at work in this all along. And if you know the story, you know that God is doing this. So theory one, it is written by somebody in David's court, kind of as an explanation of how it is that the king of the Israelites has a Moabite ancestor. The second theory says that it might be written in support of marriage between Israelites and non-Israelites. That would mean it was probably written after the Babylonian exile, and intermarriage between Israelites and non-Israelites is a very hot topic for Ezra and Nehemiah, these people who are leading the reconstruction of Jerusalem and the temple. So if this theory is true, there is a scholar or religious leader who actually thinks that marriage between Israelites and non-Israelites is okay. So they are writing it kind of as a counterpoint to Ezra and Nehemiah. And you can see that in the story, in that Ruth is kind of the model proselyte. She comes and she does everything according to the Israelite customs. She is living in a faithful way. This kindness shown between her and Naomi and Boaz, and Boaz's kindness towards her. It doesn't matter that she's not an Israelite. So this example of a marriage between an Israelite and a non-Israelite is kind of lifted up as saying it's okay. Not only was it okay because Ruth is doing everything right according to Jewish custom, but I mean, if an ancestor of King David could marry somebody who wasn't an Israelite, surely it is okay for us to marry non-Israelites. So we are going to read the book, and again, because it is one of the shorter books, we are going to read all 4 chapters of it. If you have one of the Bibles like the ones we have in the library, all 3 pages of it. And we will go ahead and read that. As we read it, of course, jot down anything that really catches your attention. Jot down anything where you say, yeah, I got some questions on that. But also, if you see something that really makes you lean towards, this was written by somebody to help support David's claim to the throne, or you read something and you go, this actually sounds more like they're trying to make marriage between Israelites and non-Israelites more acceptable. If you see anything that kind of pushes you in one direction or the other, jot that down as well. I will throw out there, this is the only book of the Old Testament that I have read entirely in Hebrew. There were a group of people in college who were studying some very rudimentary basic Hebrew, and over the course of several weeks, a very patient professor sat with us and read through it in Hebrew with us. So while I am making progress on my translation of the Greek New Testament, this was the apex of my knowledge of Hebrew, and most of that has gone to the land of wind and ghosts, unfortunately. But let us go ahead and read.
Before we start that, just one question from a historical context. King David, it has indicated here, lived around 1000 BC.
Mhm.
And just for a sake of how that fits in, through a historical timeline, what is the approximate timeline given to say when Joshua got the Israelites into the promised land, in terms of how far back did that go?
So,
If there's an estimate for that.
right, I believe the most common number or date that I hear is that the Exodus happened around 1200 BC. So that would put Joshua entering the promised land circa 1150, 1160 BC. So, the Exodus plus 40 years. And you have Joshua's campaigns, and you've got roughly 150 years of the judges. So I think that is kind of what we're looking at here.
Okay.
So while for what it's worth, while the judges are doing their thing over here in the Levant, the Trojan War is going on up in Anatolia. So that the traditional date of the Trojan War ends in 1184 BC. So there you have it.
Sounds like the time really when that's about the furthest time we can go back in human history, then, when we have written down manuscripts that are somewhat revered yet today. Or some go back even further?
So there's a variety of things that the very oldest written things we have are clay tablets, and they are mostly business records. People are trying to keep track of what they've sold and what they bought and so on. But there are some other sources, kind of monuments and stuff in Egypt, some other places in the Middle East, and there's a few of these inscriptions and whatever that you can actually use to fix particular dates, because sometimes they will refer to the battle of such and such took place and there was a solar eclipse, and the astronomers and the historians sit down and they can cross-reference, and they can say, actually, projecting our calendar back, we can tell that this battle took place on October 17th, 4400 BC or whatever. So there are some things that go back quite a bit further in history where we can pinpoint certain dates. But yeah, if the Book of Ruth actually is from around the time of David, yeah, it is definitely one of the most ancient parts of the Bible, and probably one of the most ancient texts that we have kind of reliable evidence for.
And has importance.
Mm-hmm.
Can we say that Ruth lived probably around 1050 BC?
Yeah, maybe a little earlier than that, because King David's reign begins a little before 1000 BC, so he's an adult around 1000 BC. So his grandmother, yeah, you could jump back 50 years. So mid 11th century BC, we're looking at.
And can they do carbon dating of the original scroll?
They can do carbon dating of scrolls that we have, but the oldest biblical manuscripts that we have are nowhere near 1000 BC. One of the reasons people were so excited about the Dead Sea Scrolls is that they were from the 1st century, and that was several hundred years earlier than any other Old Testament manuscripts that we had. And there have since been a couple of other collections of scrolls found, some biblical, some classical, all those different things. But we have nothing even close to being old enough that we could say, you know, this could have been an original. But as I so often say, with so many ancient texts, the fact that we have anything at all is pretty remarkable. You know, so if this book, even if this book was written, you know, say 500 BC, that would be remarkable that we have copies of it. If it was written in close to 1000 BC, that's even more remarkable that we still have copies of it. And, you know, they were passed down, so they're not original copies, but the fact that we have anything at all is pretty amazing. So let's go ahead and read. And like I said, anything that really jumps out at you as being of interest, anything where you say, I want to go back to that, ask some more questions, or anything that kind of makes you say, this is making me lean more towards kind of one of these theories about authorship or the other. Jot those things down as we read. Nick, will you start us off with chapter 1, verses 1 through 5?
In the days when judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem in Judah went to live in the country of Moab, he and his wife and 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of the wife was Naomi, and the names of the 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. They went into the country of Moab and remained there. But Elimelech and the husband of Naomi died, and she's left with the 2 sons. And they took Moabite wives. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other was Ruth. When they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died. So the woman was left without her 2 sons and a husband.
So Tom, can you take us from 6 to 14?
Then she started to return with her daughters-in-law from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab that the Lord had considered his people and given them food. So she set out from the place where she had been living, she and her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went on their way to go back to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead with me. The Lord grant that you may find security, each of you in the house of your husband." Then she kissed them, and they wept aloud. They said to her, "No, we will return with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Do I still have sons in my womb that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. Even if I thought there was hope for me, even if I should have a husband tonight and bear sons, would you then wait until they were grown? Would you then refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, it has been far more bitter for me than for you, because the hand of the Lord has turned against me." Then they wept aloud again. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her.
And Carol, can you take us from 15 to 22 down to the end of the chapter?
So she said, See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. But Ruth said, do not press me to leave you or turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die. There will I be buried. May the Lord do thus and so to me, and more as well, even if death parts me from you. When Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more to her. So the two of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women said, is this Naomi? She said to them, call me no longer Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt bitterly with me. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has dealt harshly with me, and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me? So Naomi returned together with Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, who came back with her from the country of Moab. They came to Bethlehem as the beginning of the barley harvest.
Jane, let me have you get us into chapter 2, if you can give us verses 1 through 7. And you'll have to unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. I missed part of it. Now, Naomi had a kinsman on her husband's side, a prominent rich man of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth, the Moabite, said to Naomi, let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain behind someone whose side I may find favor. She said to her, go, my daughter. So she went. She came and gleaned in the fields behind the reapers. As it happened, she came to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech, whatever. Just then, Boaz came from Bethlehem. He said to the reapers, the Lord be with you. They answered, the Lord bless you. Then Boaz said to his servants, who was in charge of the reapers, to whom does this young woman belong? The servant who was in charge of the reapers answered, she was a Moabite who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. She said, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the reapers. So she came, and she has been on her feet from the early in the morning until now, without resting for even a moment.
Then Boaz said to Ruth, now listen, my daughter, do not go to glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young women. Keep your eyes on the field that is being reaped and follow behind them. I have ordered the young men not to bother you. If you get thirsty, go to the vessels and drink from what the young men have drawn. Then she fell prostrate with her face to the ground and said to him, why have I found favor in your sight, that you should take notice of me when I am a foreigner? But Boaz answered her, all that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told me, and how you left your father and mother and your native land and came to a people that you did not know before. May the Lord reward you for your deeds, and may you have a full reward from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge. Then she said, may I continue to find favor in your sight, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servants, even though I am not one of your servants. Nick, can you give us verses 14 through 16?
At mealtime, Boaz said to her, come here and eat some of the bread and dip your morsel in this sour wine. So she sat beside the reapers, and he heaped up for her some parched grain. She ate until she was satisfied, and she had some left over. When she got up to glean, Boaz instructed his young men, "Let her glean even among the standing sheaves, and do not reproach her. You must also pull out some handfuls for her from the bundles, and leave them for her to glean, and do not rebuke her."
And Tom, if you could give us 17 through 23, please.
So she gleaned in the field until evening. Then she beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. She picked it up and came into the town, and her mother-in-law saw how much she had gleaned. Then she took out and gave her what was left over after she herself had been satisfied. Her mother-in-law said to her, "Where did you glean today? And where have you worked? Blessed be the man who took notice of you." So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked and said, "The name of the man with whom I work today is Boaz." Then Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, Blessed be he by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead." Naomi also said to her, "The man is a relative of ours, one of our nearest kin." Then Ruth the Moabite said, "He even said to me, 'Stay close by my servants until they have finished all of my harvest.'" Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, "It is better, my daughter, that you go out with this young woman, otherwise you might be bothered in another field." So she stayed close to the young women of Boaz, gleaning until the end of the barley and wheat harvest, and she lived with her mother-in-law.
Harold, can you bring us into chapter 3 with verses 1 through 5?
Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, I need to seek some security for you so that it may be well with you. Now here is our kinsman Boaz, with whose young women you have been working. See, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Now wash and anoint yourself, and put on your best clothes, and go down to the threshing floor, but do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, observe the place where he lies, then go and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do." She said to him, "All that you tell me, I will do."
Jane, could you give us verses 6 through 13?
So she went down to the threshing floor and did as her mother-in-law had instructed her. When Boaz had eaten and drunk, and he was in a contented mood, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. Then she came stealthily and uncovered his feet and lay down. At midnight the man was startled and turned over there, and there, lying at his feet, was a woman. He said, "Who are you?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your cloak over your servant, for you are next of kin." He said, "May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. This last instance of your loyalty is better than the first. You have not gone after the young men, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, do not be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask. For all the assembly of my people know that you are a worthy woman. But now, though it is true that I am a near kinsman, there is another kinsman more closely related than I. Remain this night, and in the morning he will act as next of kin for you. Good, let him do it. If he is not willing to act as next of kin for you, then as the Lord lives, I will act as next of kin for you. Lie down until morning."
So she lay at his feet until morning, but got up before one person could recognize another, for he said, "It must not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor." Then he said, "Bring the cloak that you are wearing and hold it out." So she held it, and he measured out 6 measures of barley and put it on her back. Then he went into the city. She came to her mother-in-law, who said, "How did things go with you, my daughter?" Then she told her all that the man had done for her, saying, "He gave me these 6 measures of barley, for he said, 'Do not go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed.'" She replied, "Wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today." So, Nick, can you give us chapter 4, verses 1 through 6?
No sooner had Boaz gone up to the gate and sat down there than the next of kin whom Boaz had spoken came passing by. So Boaz said, "Come over, friend, sit down here." She went over and sat down. Then Boaz took ten men of elders of the city and said, "Sit down there, sit down here." So they sat down. He then said to the next of kin, "Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our kinsman Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you about it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, then redeem it. But if you will not, tell me so that I may know, for there is no one prior to you to redeem it. So I come after you." So he said, "I will redeem it." Then Boaz said, "The day you acquire the field from the hand of Naomi, you are also acquiring Ruth, the Moabite widow of the dead man, to maintain the dead man's name on his inheritance." At this, the next of kin said, "I cannot redeem it for myself without damaging my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption for yourself. Take it yourself, for I cannot redeem it."
And then, Tom, if you could pick up with verse 7 and take us down to verse 12.
Now, now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm a transaction, the one took off a sandal and gave it to the other. This was the manner of attesting in Israel. So when the next of kin said to Boaz, "Acquire it for yourself," he took off his sandal. Then Boaz said to the elders and all the people, "Today you are witnessing that I have acquired from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, the wife of Mahlon, to be my wife, to maintain the dead man's name on his inheritance, in order that the name of the dead may not be cut off from his kindred and from the gate of his native place. Today you are witnesses." Then all the people were at the gate, along with the elders, said, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you produce children in Ephrathah and bestow a name in Bethlehem, and through the children that the Lord will give you by this young woman, may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah."
Then, Carol, could you finish us off there?
So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. When they came together, the Lord made her conceive, and she bore a son. Then the woman said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without next of kin, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has borne him. Then Naomi took the child and laid him in her bosom and became his nurse. The women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." They named him Obed. He became the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now there were the descendants of Perez. Perez became the father of Hezron, Hezron of Ram, Ram of Amminadab, Amminadab, Nahshon, Nahshon of Salmon, Salmon of Boaz, Boaz of Obed, Obed of Jesse, and Jesse of David.
Amen.
Amen.
So, we have just read an entire book of the Bible together, which is pretty fantastic. What jumped out to people? First reactions, things that caught your attention.
Well, in this day of age of dating and good relationship between man and woman, to just marry somebody and have kids, that's absurd.
Yes, culturally it is really different from what we are accustomed to. So part of what we need to keep in mind is this is very much a society structured by men for men. But this whole idea, so if you look in, for example, chapter 2, verse 20, there's a little footnote there. And so next of kin, they say, or with one with the right to redeem. The idea is that your family member there are certain family members who are obligated to redeem, to kind of assume responsibility for you. So a woman needs a male family member, husband, father, brother, son, to be responsible for her. So when they're talking about they're trying to get her hooked up with the next of kin, there is going to be a male family member who will be responsible for her. And that is, that is meant as a protection for her, so that she is just not out on her rear with no one to support her. It also has to do with continuing the lineage of the family. It is the responsibility of the next of kin, or the one with the right to redeem, to continue the family. Remember, this is a tribal, a clan-based society. Continuing your family line means that the land stays in your family, means that the wealth stays in your family. These are important things. So, so marriage is approached in a very different way than typically we would approach it in the United States. There are other parts of the world in our own time where marriage is looked at a little more similarly, like this, where there would be arranged marriages, and it is more about the bringing together of the two families. But yeah, it is sometimes hard for us to make sense of this. So the idea of Naomi trying to hook Ruth up with a family member, it actually is to everyone's advantage for this to happen. So yeah,
including Naomi's.
Right.
Right, exactly, yes.
And then the child that Ruth bore actually is said to be born to Naomi. Am I understanding that correctly?
That seems to be the case. So that interpretation, if that is in line with the customs of the culture and the Mosaic law, that that is a detail you would definitely want to put in there if you wanted to say that David does have a legitimate claim to the throne, because he's not actually Ruth's child. He's actually Naomi's child. And Naomi is from Bethlehem. She's an Israelite. This is all okay. And again, that idea of maintaining the family lineage is really critically important to these folks. So the way they reckon who belongs to whom, that also is going to be kind of different from how we operate.
Meaning that from a legalistic standpoint is more important than the actual bloodline, because it's obvious from the writing here that this heir of David, or not heir of David, but ancestor of David, was born from Ruth and not Naomi, but yet legally to Naomi.
Right. And also that the father is one of Naomi's relatives.
So they could have traced the genealogy to through Boaz instead of Ruth, right?
Exactly. Yes. Yep.
But they chose Ruth, which that just seems odd to me. Why wouldn't they just say not leave Ruth in it at all, and just except for the fact that she's a Moabite, and it's makes Jesus's line, David's line, a little less pure.
So in the context of the book of Ruth, yeah, that would become important again if if it's well known among people that, yeah, well, David's grandmother was actually a Moabite. You can't really snuff out that knowledge, but you could say, look, God was at work in this. The people of that time who were right there blessed this. The good, faithful people of Bethlehem were down with this. If you were looking at it in the context of the New Testament, which we'll look at next week or the following week, there are other motivations for why you would be sure to include Ruth in the genealogy of Jesus, along with Tamar and along with Rahab. So the motivations would be different, but it seems to be one of those things that's kind of common knowledge. David's grandmother was a Moabite. What do we do with that? In David's own time, it had something to do with saying, yeah, it's okay that she was a Moabite because she was brought into the people of Israel in this way. If it is closer to the time of rebuilding the temple, it may very well be saying, yeah, I know Ezra and Nehemiah are really adamant about not marrying people outside of Israel, but if even David's family could do this, it's okay for us. So it seems to be one of those things that they are trying to interpret or reinterpret part of the story that is already known. The genie is already out of the bottle on this. We have to decide what we're going to do with it.
So then, with respect to the two theories, I mean, it seems to me that both seem to be well supported.
Yep. And to the best of my knowledge, I don't believe either is really hands down the consensus on it. One of the things or a couple things that I noted in reading through it is the way that the law of Moses kind of shapes all this, not only with the that notion of a family member's obligation or responsibility to take responsibility for another family member. That's part of the Mosaic law. But she goes out to glean, and if we recall in the Mosaic law, you are not supposed to pick your fields clean when you harvest them. You're supposed to leave part of the grain in the field so that people who have nowhere else to turn can follow through and at least get enough to get by. So because people are adhering to the Mosaic law, Ruth and Naomi survive because they are able to eat.
Now it seems that Boaz was older, but still unmarried. This is a time when they only had one wife, right? He wouldn't have married several wives, or the other fellow that was the next of kin. It doesn't really say why he said no,
Right?
but could it have been because he had another wife and did they only have one wife at this time?
Oh, it seems to have been kind of all over the place.
Okay.
Because remember, in Genesis, we have multiple patriarchs that take several wives, but also by the time we get into the monarchy, David and Solomon in particular have multiple wives. So
Mhm.
I don't think there was I don't think there was a kind of authoritative ruling on, one wife, multiple wives, whatever the case may be. Um,
I think it probably depended how wealthy they were because they tend to be expensive.
Mhm.
yep. I mean, Tom said it, but I'm not going to argue with him on it. Yeah, it doesn't say anything about Boaz's marital status. Did he take on Ruth as another wife? Did the next of kin already have a wife? And I cannot support two wives, or I don't want two wives. Yeah, I
Was
don't
struck
know.
how Boaz was always calling her daughter. Was it maybe mostly age difference, maybe? He was calling Ruth daughter.
Yeah, I don't know how much of it is age difference and how much of it is just to emphasize the family ties. Because I mean, if you read particularly end of chapter 2 into chapter 3, Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, she said to Ruth the Moabite, "It is better, my daughter." Um, Naomi said to her, "My daughter." Uh, so they're really using a lot of family terminology here, I think, to really emphasize the way the family is fulfilling those obligations to care for each other. So it may be something like that. But yeah, it would definitely get us to think. Um, it could just be a courtesy, but yeah, it would seem to imply there's some age difference, which again is not that unusual.
Who are these young women of Boaz there? Do we have any
Uh,
idea?
Not
Like
a clue.
who is she telling her to stay with? These other relatives or
Could be other relatives, could
people
be
in the
servants, could
town?
be slaves,
Okay.
people who are somehow a part of his household.
So in chapter 2, Boaz tells Ruth, "Now listen, my daughter, do not go to glean another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young women." So assuming as though women were the reapers. Then
hmm
a couple of verses down the road, the young men. So is it
And
men or women? Is it confused? It's both.
my guess is that it's very much an agricultural society at this time, and probably harvest was a time when everybody who was able to help at all was probably out there helping. So it was probably men and women. So um, maybe they had different roles. The men would do this part of the harvest, the women would do that part of the harvest. But it was probably the sort of thing where we're trying to get the crop in because it's ripe, it's ready to be harvested. One bad storm is going to wreck everything that's still left in the field. We need to get this in quickly. So my guess is that probably men and women are both out there working. Everything else kind of goes on the back burner while you're trying to bring in the harvest because it's time sensitive. So there's probably it would seem to me that you would have men and women out there harvesting. And so a couple of things to note here. Chapter 1 in particular kind of struck me with that theme of exile and return. They had to leave home because of the famine. They had to leave Moab later because people had died. And they return to Bethlehem. And yet that, in a sense, is kind of like exile for Ruth because she is leaving her home. And that theme is all through Genesis, all through Exodus. So that theme of exile and return kind of caught my attention there in chapter 1. But, there are several other things, but we will get into that next week as we do kind of a close read and stop and interpret as we go. So I don't want to tip my hand too much tonight. Other thoughts, other insights, questions?
It seems that Boaz was a gentleman
Mm-hmm.
and honest businessman, an honest person to deal with the way he went to his other kinsman that was a nearer kinsman to her than to Naomi than he was. He just seemed like a real upstanding citizen.
An extraordinary generosity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that also, I think we're supposed to get that from the story that Boaz is fulfilling his obligations. He is generous. He is caring, and the fact that Ruth is a Moabite doesn't stop him from doing that. So I think that may be part of what we're supposed to take away from it. Boaz is a stand-up guy, and the fact that Ruth is a Moabite doesn't make him change what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
So next week we are going to come back to Ruth. We are going to read through it again, but much more slowly, and we'll kind of stop and assess and interpret as we go, hopefully to just add a little more depth to our understanding, and we will go from there. Would someone be willing to pray the Lord's Prayer on behalf of the group as we close tonight?
I can do that.
Thank you.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
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 Thank you, everyone, for your time. Thank you for gathering for study tonight, and blessings on your evening.
Thank you, Pastor.
Good night,
You're
everyone.
very welcome.
Good night.
Good
Take
night.
care. Good night.